Hi, am I coming through?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm Ronnie Tessler, the photographer of these works. I work mostly in black and white in the documentary tradition. This exhibition is part of a donation that I made of my entire collection of photographs that I did over about a 20-year span. And it includes the camera I used, the leather vest, the little holster for my light meter that I required in those days, everything related to what I had done photographically. And I was happy the archives accepted this gift because I felt it was the right place. They collect photographic works and family photos and films. And in that huge collection are the life works of 3 German Jewish BC photographers. So this felt like the right place to put this work. Besides the rodeo work, I produced a few other major bodies of work. One was a selectively hand-colored work that was done in Israel over a period of years, and that was called Israeli Sweet. And after that, I did a project for the Alberta government for their 75th anniversary, along with about a dozen other photographers. And the last major project that I did, also at least 3 years in the making, was photographing different Canadian ethnic and cultural, sociocultural groups, celebrating their heritage in their own way for themselves, not as a spectacle for the public.
Cool. My name's Sarah. I had the pleasure of curating this exhibit with Michael and Ronnie. And then I also got to make a film about it. Yeah, that's all I have to say.
So Sarah, I think you have some images that you chose just to highlight the exhibition. And I think you had some questions that I have to answer.
I do. Michael, would you mind screen sharing those photographs?
Sure. Here we go.
So can everyone see that? Just hope so. All right, well, before we get into this particular photograph, maybe let's start with what your initial interest in documenting rodeos was.
Well, the first thing I would say is that I didn't wake up one day and say, I must explore and portray rodeo. It was more happenstance. There was a group of 4 of us who belonged to a nonprofit photographic society. And we had gone to a number of workshops, and I would call this a self-organized workshop. Somebody proposed that we go to Williams Lake. And from that point on, my interest was spurred in, oh dear, pardon the bad pun. But anyway, I was intrigued by rodeo.
All right. And what do you think kept you wanting to do it for 3 years, to photograph rodeos for 3 years?
It really resonated with me at that time in my life. I was fairly new to photography, so I wasn't fully confident in my ability to expose or my printing skills. And I'd never put together a major project where you do a large body of work that holds together and says something as a unit. So there was something about these men. They were self-motivated and they were seeking challenges. And they're also like soloists. They don't have team support or financial backing. And they're very passionate about what they do. They're really dedicated to it. So like I said, all this resonated with me and where I was at in my photographic life.
All right, thanks. Maybe let's move on to the photograph of it now. And can you explain to me why the cowboy is taping up his arm?
Yeah, he's a bareback rider. So they jam their hand into a leather glove, which he doesn't have on yet. And then this gloved hand is jammed into a little handle, like a suitcase handle, and that's attached to a small leather pad, and that goes around the withers of the horse and is cinched underneath. And they don't have stirrups, which is why they're called bareback riders. They're just sitting on the horse's backbone. And so what is keeping it together is that one hand that's in the little handle, and the strength of his riding arm. So it's up to him to feel the horse's movement, sort of anticipate it, follow up, and spur, but he's spurring freely. He's not held in by stirrups. So the strength of that one arm in the little handle is major, and he's taping it up for strength. And this is something a bull rider would do as well. There's some similarities in their techniques. The only thing holding them on is that one riding arm. And I would also say that, like carpenters, people who major in one arm, that arm is visibly larger. So you can look at somebody and say, aha, you ride right or you ride left.
All right. And why were you interested in general of capturing the cowboy preparing for his ride?
Well, I was interested in recording all aspects of rodeo because there's a lot of myth attached to it. So there are rodeo photographers, that's a career, and it's been around a long time. And what they do is photograph the prime moment when the performer is at their best in an event, and the animal they're working with, riding with. And then afterwards, they sell the photos to the photographers, sorry, to the cowboys. And they buy them because they're interested in keeping a record of their history at that short phase of their life, because like hockey or other violent sports, it's a short lifespan in that career. So I was there making photographs for myself, and it was my goal to tell the whole story.
And just curious, do you remember taking this specific photograph?
Yes, I do. I do remember it. I just can't remember the guy's name. It wasn't anyone I knew well.
All right. Well, I think we can move on to the next photo then, which I do have information was taken at Black Diamond, Alberta in 1979.
This, as you'll see, is a photo of a young guy who's been bucked off in a bareback ride, and he's on the ground, and there are many people behind watching. It's very eerie for me to see it now. Kelvin was 19, and he was on his way up in the rodeo world. And shortly after this was taken, he and 3 other people I knew, 2 of them well, including the pilot of the plane, were flying from Cloverdale to California, to a rodeo in California. And they went down over the mountains and they all perished. So it's odd for me to see this. It's almost like it's haunted or prescient, of what was going to happen, which is foolish. But in retrospect, that's what it looks like.
And do you yourself have any stories while you're taking photographs about the risk associated with rodeo?
I have my own stories. Let me just say a few things about this one, though, because it's a pretty graphic portrayal of the risks from the point of view of the performers. So you can be bucked off, as you see. You can be stepped on, butted, gored, tangled in the rigging, smashed into the fence or the metal chutes. The animal can roll on you and they weigh 1 or 2 tons. But there are other risks. There are the long night drives and the plane rides through the mountains, which I described. And there are financial risks as well, because as I said, it's not a team sport, and they're responsible for getting themselves down the road. So you pay to enter each event. It might be more than one in a single rodeo that you enter. Then you go down the road, you have your gas, your equipment, your place to sleep if you're not driving all night. And if you don't win, and at that time the winnings weren't huge, then you could expect to have to work, say, in the oil fields over the winter so that you could pay for your next season Crackin' Out. So as for myself, yes, I had a few incidents. I was at an indoor bull riding school for novice riders, and by this time I had long stopped using a telephoto lens, so I was right in the infield, and scared as hell. So once I was chased by a bull and I ran for the fence, I threw the camera through and I leaped over it myself. And the camera sustained some superficial injuries. So when I took it into Leica to be repaired here in Vancouver, for some reason, well, they're very particular, German designers, they repaired it. They painted the gouges in the covering on the camera. And I was quite disappointed because that was like my battle wound, or the, you know, the notch on your belt. There was a night where I sat out all night in a snowstorm in a camper truck with a bullfighter who was giving me a ride to the next rodeo. The cowboys were a bit of a risk. They were kind of loose-handed, and they didn't care whether how old you were, what you looked like, whether they were married. They just, women intrigue them. And photographically, there was an issue with dust. Because it could, you had to get your film out of the camera, rewound out of the camera, and a fresh one wound on without sustaining any dust, because it scratched your negatives. And if it scratched your lens, that's pretty significant cost there. But I would say most significantly is the risk just in taking photos. Are you going to measure up to the goals you set yourself?
Nice. I think I might move on to the next one if there's anything else you want to say.
No.
All right. Let's see. I think it was this one.
Yeah.
So this one it was taken in 1978 in Vernon, BC. And do you mind talking about the man in this photograph?
Sure. And I saw his daughter listening in there. Hello, Sophie, who I haven't seen since you were about 2. So this is Ted Verrill, and he was a former rodeo rider, I think bareback. And he was a stock contractor. It was called Grasslands Rodeo Company. And they provided the animals, all types of animals, for the rodeos. They weren't the only stock contracting company, but Ted was really respected in this field. And I know that he worked the finals for many, many years. And I think he may have been inducted into the Rodeo Hall of Fame as a stock contractor, or maybe just a general contributor to rodeo in Western Canada. So I think you once asked me, I think, about the decisive moment. Mm-hmm. Because we were talking about this film when I said to you that, you know, he has this warm, loving expression on his face, but what really magnified it was his hand on the baby's back. And so that's a moment of intuitively seeing, as a photographer, something that was going to make a powerful image.
And do you want to talk a bit more about how the decisive moment sort of encaptured the whole collection, or no?
Well, like many people of my time, and possibly still, if there's still documentary photographers out there, this expression was coined by a French photographer, Henri Cartier-Bresson. And it speaks to a confluence, I guess, of 2 things: timing, and then this special sort of graphic edge, something that gives the photograph a certain edge that takes it beyond just representing a scene. And it adds emotion and just enhances the spontaneity of a moment.
And what do you think what would you hope that the audience takes away from this collection?
Well, I hope that they take away an understanding of the life, what it means to be a cowboy, because it's been so mythologized in popular culture.
All right, let's move on to the next photo then, which is this one here. which was taken in Calgary, Alberta in 1978. Maybe you can talk about where this photo was taken.
Oh, sure. This was taken in the townhouse of my friend Deb. I met her when she was 18 at a bull riding school, the same one where I sustained the damage to the camera. And she was maintaining that while trying to become a bull rider by being a courier. So now she's Deborah, and she's already retired chartered accountant and ultramarathon runner. But in those days, she was just making her way in rodeo. And the young guys don't have a pile of money, so they often, multiple guys in a hotel room sneak into a hotel room to try and save money. So we said these young guys, well, I should probably say her because she owned the place, that a couple of these young guys could stay with us for a couple nights. And those are Deb's hats on the chair. Now, normally, like the one on the coiled rope, the hat is upside down on the crown to maintain the brim, because the brim is very meticulously shaped, just so they want it. So they never put the hat brim down on the off chance they could ruin the shaping. And it's sitting in a coiled rope. It could be along to a bronc rider, that rope. It doesn't look like a lariat. And I want to comment on the shoes, because everybody thinks of the cowboy in the heeled boot, but especially among the younger generation, they had walking boots or just regular running shoes, or maybe wallabies there that they changed into. And the reason Deb's hats are perched like that is because that's a softly upholstered chair. Or say she came into somebody else's room and there was a table, she would have put her hat crown down as well.
And do you want to touch on the lifestyle of rodeo?
Well, sure. It means being on the move and away from your family. It means a different bed every night, or else keeping yourself awake on the road, and keeping yourself healthy for your performance in the arena. Although after that description, you'd probably say, well, it's not going to lead to healthiness. Either you're competing or you're going down the road trying to get to the next rodeo. And if you're a timed eventer, you're hauling a horse or horses, and you have to care for those as well. So it's not an easy life. And the rodeos don't run all week. So you're trying to jam everything into a 3-day period, usually over a long weekend. And so that's where the overnight drives and the flights enter into it. And then you have partying. That doesn't make it any easier, because partying means lots of beer, lots of dancing.
Great. All right. Well, let's move on to the last photo then here.
Oh, I just should say something else about these guys.
Please.
Mostly the guys that I interacted with, is that they're very companionable and extremely loyal. They've always got your back in a difficult situation. They're really good storytellers. I found they're really eagle-eyed. They can notice the smallest thing the furthest away. And they love a good joke, and they really look out for each other. So, and the thing that makes rodeo really fascinating is that because they're independent competitors and they're competing against each other, they share information. So say I drew Desperado as my bull of the night. Well, a few guys will say, well, just watch. When he cracks out of the chute, he's going to turn right and then he's going to spin. So they're sharing this kind of information with their competitors. And I just admired that.
Mm-hmm. All right, so this is the last photo we're going to talk about today. It was taken in Williams Lake, BC in 1977. Before I say anything about it, do you want to say anything about it, Ronnie?
Well, I felt for this poor guy. I think he was a bull rider, and he was bucked off into this horribly muddy infield. And you can see he wasn't happy with his ride. And I just felt I had to capture all sides of rodeo. It wasn't all glory.
Mhm. Well, I'll tell the story behind this photo, which is how this is sort of the introduction to the film, and how the idea for the film came about is that me and Ronnie were talking about this photo, and I was like, did the Cowboys love this one because it showed a man who was facing the elements and, you know, covered in mud and just looked like a manly man? And then Ronnie laughed and she said, no, the Cowboys liked this one because he was covered in mud and he looked like a fool. So that sort of got the idea for the film, which was just about how one image can have just multiple perspectives about what it means, or the history behind it, or the ideas behind it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, which is how the film came to be. And I guess before we watch it, I just want to make two other points, which is, I feel like, so the film's all about multitudes and what different people see in different photographs. And I feel like I also wanted that multifaceted, you know, lots of perspectives, because I am an outsider rodeo. I've actually never been to a rodeo. So I feel like for me, I was like, well, I want to learn more and I want to talk to a lot of different people about a lot of different aspects of rodeo. So it was partly for me as well. Did I have anything else to say about it? Oh yeah, I think the last thing is that when you do view it in tandem with the exhibition. The exhibition and the film are a cohesive whole that work together. And that's all I had to say about that. Yeah.
Thank you both for that conversation. That was great. We're going to go to the film now. I just want to say that this kind of conversational tone is really what you're going to find in the exhibit, hearing Ronnie's recollections of these images. And the exhibit, I should mention, is on our website, jewishmuseum.ca. And now let's watch the film, shall we?
Remember Ronnie coming to the rodeos, and I have to say I was probably a little bit jealous of her, because she was.
I showed Ronnie Tessler's work once when I owned a place called the Coburg Gallery at 314 West Cordova Street.
I have to say that I was pretty young for most of this, but I do remember, you know, going to rodeos and my parents taking stock.
Yeah, I don't know. We just kind of hit it off and became friends. We're still friends 30-some years later. It's crazy.
Current book project is on the history of the Gay Rodeo Association. It's titled.
I know in southern Alberta here, you have all these big ranches down south, which is all on Blackfoot territory. It's all our land.
We got into the archive and we were getting to pick our project for the year.
I photographed these images that you are looking at between the years 1976 and 1979, with aspirations to develop myself personally, and my choice was photography.
You know, the thing that, of course, is in a way the most interesting thing is what the artist or the photographer's intentions were, what actually drew them to it, because then you're perhaps a little bit closer to matching the truth of what's going on in the photograph with what the photographer saw. Then you could have 100 different art historians or critics or curators come along and look at the same photograph, and you have 100 different stories. And of course, multiple stories might be plausibly true. One just doesn't know. Because it's a solitary sport,
it's up to the performer or the rodeo cowboy to bring his own gear and to prepare himself both physically and mentally.
Bob won Pendleton in the Canadian finals. He was a funny built little guy for a bronc rider. He was a little heavier, but man, he could ride. Oh my God.
Yeah, I love their shirts too. They got the nice shiny shirts.
Most guys, either if they had made it to the finals, had their final shirts, or most of them actually had plaid shirts. But these were terrific, these satin shirts.
What stands out to me is, well, like, why are they sitting on their saddles? Like, this is just me not knowing enough about rodeo, but
you need to get your seat. You need to know you're seated just so, like, the way that feels comfortable. It's like watching a pianist sit down on the piano bench, and fuss till finally they raise their hands and begin.
And your legs are hugging the swells there of the saddle, the front of the saddle. And you can see that white powder on there. That's rosin, the same as you put on a violin string. It makes it sticky. So what they're doing there is warming up their saddles before they go to ride. And it was probably raining that day, so they're under cover of a grandstand. Otherwise, we would do that behind the chutes.
I think a cool thing about rodeo, especially then, was sort of the blend between the competitor and the spectator.
I can also attest here in my First Nation, we have a rodeo arena, and it's often rented by non-Indigenous people for rodeos. So there's I think as well, a long history of camaraderie in the cowboy world. So I think that also speaks to this, that, the coming together in a particular sport that actually joins people rather than divides them.
I always thought of rodeos as in the plains, and so seeing them in the woods, in the mountains, was a bit of a shock to me.
That's a BC interior rodeo somewhere, and everybody just getting ready before the rodeo. Looks like they're all getting ready for the grand entry.
The main reason why I was interested in this picture is because these women are ready to ride. It would have been nice to see more of that throughout the series.
One of the things that I remembered so clearly about Ronnie was her really strong focus on the performer cowboys. It sort of reinforced the thoughts I was having about women not being the major players in what people see as rodeo. I wanted even then to be recognized as an integral part of what was going on with this rodeo business, and it was very easy for people not to recognize that. There is this sense of rodeo being white men participating, and that's kind of what it is. And of course, anybody who has any involvement with rodeo at all knows that from the word go, there have been Indigenous people involved.
In the early days of, the bringing in the cattle, and of course the whole sort of disappearance of the bison in favor of the cattle and development. So, you really did need a lot of frontiersmen at that time who were also, transitioned very easily into being cowboys. So really, if you take a look at colonization, they were at the forefront. They were the front lines of colonization in so many ways. But it's interesting because, as Indigenous people being resilient throughout this process, we've been very quick to adapt to various practices, including rodeo, and become actually really good at it. For me, anyway, I've always had sort of that mixed emotion that, while we love the sport, we also realize that it's all part of this colonization process. And yet, here we are. And, and we excel at it. So, like anything in relation to the colonial project, as our ancestors, our elders often tell us, learn it and then do it better.
Cowboy, it comes from the word vaquero, vaca meaning cow. It was Spanish and then Mexican, completely culturally appropriating cowboy identity during a time of Western expansion and the emergence of the white Anglo cowboy in the frontier American West. The origin of this has more Latinx roots than anything.
I know my dad, he was like, he had, I think, 3 or 4 cowboy hats, and I think I still have one. He passed a few years back. And they're just like, you just don't mess with their cowboy hats.
The cowboy hat in queer culture, as far as gay rodeo, at times I refer to the look of a cowboy as true drag. The person dressing up has to have the largest hat, the biggest belt buckle, the flashiest chaps.
I grew up in a more rural setting, and now I live in a very urban setting. Moving to an urban setting and being around people in an urban setting, you kind of get this derision towards people that think differently from you, and like you're like, why are they so conservative? Why are they this, that? And so I think what I got from this series was just a lot of humanity. That's the most important part.
I don't actually divide things up quite like that. Wherever I am, I'm very conscious of my relationship to land. I'm consistently thinking about the trees, the sky, trying to resist the pavement and understand that under that pavement will always be land. So we come and we go, but the land remains.
Slow down a little, enjoy your life. I've spent the last 3.5 years living in Vancouver on a job. I just look at it out there and shake my head like, I hope you guys never discover how good we got it in the country, because it'd crowd us out again. It was just so peaceful getting home. One old blind dog and one old deaf dog, and you just go wander around the yard and go do something. They hang out with you, and life is good.
I looked at rodeo and thought, oh, that's cruel, and they dig the spurs into the horses, and oh my goodness, oh my goodness. Then I got involved in rodeo, and I realized, that's not what goes on.
I am sympathetic with animal rights advocates. At the same time, this is a long tradition, and you don't break a long tradition that easy. And I do know that a lot of the people, cowboys and farm people who look after their animals, take very good care of them.
They take care of those animals like you wouldn't believe. It's their, God, my cousin, it's almost like his kids who are all grown up now. These horses.
When the cowboys get on with their spurs, they do not make holes in those animals. And if they do, the stock contractor will be very upset with them. If anybody cut one of the animals, it's just an absolute no-no. They just can't do that because the creatures couldn't keep on going. And it's not like you have a bucking horse and then you have it for 3 rodeos and then you give it away. Those horses go on for years and years and years.
It's always unfortunate when an animal does get harmed in these situations. And of course, they don't have their own voices to tell us that, no, you can't do this. At the same time, I know there's a great love of the animals, in particular horses, by cowboys. So I can't discount that. But at the same time, perhaps in time we'll evolve even further.
People who complain about rodeo or bitch about it they know nothing of rural life. We rope calves to treat them. We do that kind of stuff. Of course, lots of them don't even eat beef. So learn something about rodeo before you go and stand there. Come on out. We'll show you. They take care of the stock. That is Lyle Sankey at Williams Lake. He was one of the top bronc riders in the world. Oh, God, there's old Wick Beth fighting bulls. Oh, my God. Oh, and Kenny Watterson, Joe Dodge, Doug Bowles. Look at all those guys. Oh, and there's, who else is that? That's Jake. That's Jake Shebar.
I think I was scared. You can tell I was right in the infield with them. I did want to show how it's dangerous. And the fact that these guys persist, in pitting themselves against a wild animal over and over again.
There are 2 judges, and each judge gives the bull a mark out of 25 and the guy a mark out of 25. So for a stock contractor, you want to see bulls that really buck. You want them to give these guys the best ride possible. Now, you also find it lovely. I find it lovely. A lot of stock hunters find it lovely when the guy gets bucked off because that means it's a really powerful bull that they can't ride.
Yeah, this is just part of it, but I would bet you that she was happy that she caught this because 2 seconds earlier, you might not have known that all of these tilts. So the clown is in a tilt that in painting had been called the dynamic diagonal. And that was one of the things that in the history of painting animated the painting. It shouldn't be this way, but if something looks as if it is more dynamic, I think that, you know, moves people to qualify it as a good photograph.
To be truthful of this one, because we were friends, I kind of recorded this moment for him because it was so dynamic and exciting.
I remember the first time Ronnie showed me that picture. I was like, holy smoke, that's a great picture. And just because this horse, that was in 1978 in the Novice Saddle Bronc I didn't merit. That horse, he was a Godferson horse. And this horse, I didn't know the horse, so you don't know how much rein to give him or what he's going to do. And he come out there about 3 or 4 jumps and flung me in the air. I come down pretty much on my feet. It was hilarious. But see, he was going straight down the arena. You can see him turning to the right there. He went right in a hurry, and I kept going. I worked 26 years in the film industry. And in that industry, I'm Coleman Robinson. Yeah, when I go, still to this day, go to a rodeo or whatever, and there's people there that remember me, and it's like, I'm Coleman Robinson, the bronc rider, not just Coleman Robinson. And that's always precious to me. So they remember.
There's a famous line from the French philosopher Michel Foucault, is that over time, documents become monuments. And over time, monuments become documents. This will become more important with the passage of time, you know? All of this may become completely extinct. You don't know where the photograph will be 500,000 years from now. The only copies of these that exist might be on some other planet where people are studying what went on Earth before it burnt out, you know? And they'll find this. And they'll be very confused. What were these people on this planet doing? Why are they looking at this person falling off a horse? Was falling off a horse a sport?
He drinks juice from a coffee cup. He's gotta be tough. Orange, no sugar, no cream. So ride along, little cowboy, at the tender young age of 4. So ride along, little cowboy, and please don't you slam that screen door. Well, he circles the block, it's about 10 o'clock. Cap gun strapped to his side.
Thanks, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that. A little taste of the exhibit and getting to hear all those voices. Sarah, do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
I feel like I said what I wanted to say about it at the beginning, but just thank you for all those that participated. I had a lot of fun.
Ronnie, we were chatting quite a bit this past week, getting everything all set to go. And you raised the point that this was really your first substantial project in photography. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that and how the experience of this series equipped you for later series?
It taught me a lot about how to relate to people that I wanted to photograph. And it also taught me about editing and then sequencing to tell a story in a strong way, in a coherent way. I'd say those were sort of the 3 major takeaways from that, and also research. I did a lot of research after that first rodeo experience in Williams Lake, and I treated every project like that. So it was a way of kind of educating myself and sort of priming my intuition so that I could sense when is a good moment and where is a good place to put myself to be able to photograph a moment that speaks to whatever it was I was photographing.
What were some of the other major projects that you did? You mentioned that you did some work in Israel and elsewhere.
I did. And I have to say that like all of my projects, beginning with the rodeo project, that I fell into it and then recognized that it was something I should pursue. So that was the outgrowth of a family visit to Israel. And then I made several more visits to focus on Israeli life. And by then I was at Emily Carr. I entered the photography program because I'd never had any formal education in photography. So I did 3rd and 4th year and graduated, and then went on to Israel again for a month. But part of that was a photography workshop on historic techniques, and one of them was hand coloring. And so I took several of those photographs from the family visit and treated them very selectively so that they were painted with a resist. And then they went into a selenium toning bath. And then the resist, which was good old, that rubbery glue, rubber cement, I would peel that off the area I'd painted, and that left it in black and white. And sometimes I would leave that as it was, and sometimes I would hand tint it, which was quite a laborious old technique. And I guess I used it as a highlighting technique for what I was exploring in Israel, which was basically just the whole panoply of Israeli life. So what was interesting to me was that I was once at the Israel Museum when I was back there to participate as a guest in a photography biennale. And so I thought, I'll take my work and see if I can get a show in Israel. And the photo curator at the Israel Museum said, I like your rodeo better. I like that work better. In other words, he was saying to me, you should stick with what you know. You don't know us. And yet that was an extremely effective exhibition. That's the one that Bill Jeffries showed. And then he sold the entire exhibition to, I think it was either the National Archives or the Canadian Museum of Contemporary Photography. So that was the exhibition he mentioned in the film. So again, multiple opinions on what is good and what is representative.
Yeah. Sarah, there was a question for you about your directorial choices, the cinematographic choice of the short film, about why you chose to place the still photos in these high action locations and that contrast, and any other style choices you made.
Yeah, I think my first inclination was that I would want somewhere. So you start from far away, I guess, and all these voices. It's like kind of like, sorry, I talk in roundabout, so this is just how it's going to be. But people are in a gallery and they're like viewing a photograph and they're like sort of talking about it. And then the closer you get to the photograph, you like kind of get to make your like own assumptions or perspective. So I feel like that was what the zoom was. But then in order to make the zoom interesting, I tried to have all the shots with a lot of movement. There's 2 shots that don't have a lot of movement. So that was like the choice of that technical zoom, and where the still photos surrounded by movement for the most part. So that's how the still and the moving fit together.
Did it come out as you envisioned, or did things go sideways a little?
Yeah, I think I'm happy with how it came out. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of things I would like to change. Like, I feel like I wish the cow came out of frame like 20 seconds, before. But like for the restrictions that we had on, I feel, and I couldn't talk to people in person and had to talk to them over the phone and all this sort of stuff. I like it currently. We'll see in the future.
And Ronnie, what's your reaction to presenting the work in this manner?
Well, it's certainly new to me, but when you have an exhibition in one place, who's ever local, if they choose to, will see it. Now, this has a much wider scope, so it's not a bad way. I mean, you don't have the same relationship, you don't have quite the same ability to see the detail, but it's an interesting way of having your work shown and many people elsewhere to see it.
I will note to everyone out there that actually scrolling through the exhibit will give you the opportunity to pause, and by clicking on any of the photos, you can enlarge them to full screen. Now, not the same as being in person with a high res print, but it's pretty close. And one day we will be in person with the real print. Did you two have other questions you wanted to ask one another? Thoughts about this process or the history behind it?
I found it an interesting process because I have my feelings and sensibilities of these images that I took, 40 years ago. And Sarah had a different perspective, and she's from another demographic too. We're pretty widely spaced in age. So we had to work a while to understand each other's points of view. And it was an interesting and really valuable process. And I didn't understand the film in the beginning either. But I see its value now. And certainly, as we've been saying all evening, there's more than one reaction, more than one point of view. And the film really demonstrates that.
And I think it was hard for me and Ronnie to get to know each other too. Like, I feel like that's why I chose not to make an artist profile about the work, because we couldn't be in the same space. We met each other once briefly, very far apart with masks on. So yeah, so I feel like it was just like another test, in this day and age. Yeah, how do you get to know one another?
Collaboration is a good way to get to know people, I guess. For better or for worse. There was a question, I think from Gloria, about how many photos are in the exhibit. Sarah, do you know that offhand? I feel like it's
15 to 20 is what I think.
Yeah, somewhere in that ballpark.
Yeah.
So obviously, that's more than are included in the film. So there are other photos from the series that don't appear in the film that you can view through the online exhibit. Did other folks have questions or thoughts or reactions they'd like to share, ask, etc.? Okay. Jasper asks us, were there any voices that you would have liked to include in the film? Maybe some that had to get cut out, or you couldn't get a hold of people?
I feel like there's a ton of voices that I would have liked to include. A lot of people that were in the photographs that, either had passed or, so there were a lot. I feel like a couple names would be Kayla Mussel, who's like one of the only female bronc riders in the world. She's very cool. And another one would have been Joan Gentles, who's in one of the photographs during her reign. She is a very important part of Western Canadian rodeo. So those are just two names.
It was shocking to me when we were discussing who Sarah might try and reach to be part of this, how many had passed away, some in accidents, but most natural. But it was really quite shocking because they were all younger than me.
Yeah. Siren asks Ronnie if you still take photos.
Not project-based, and not film cameras, an iPhone. There are certain things I still record for my own pleasure, but I have no goals for them. After the 20 years in photography, I was at a stage where there was a lot of questioning of the documentary oeuvre. People were calling it appropriation of other, other groups. What right do you have to speak for them? And I began to feel very uncomfortable, and I was asking myself, what can I do next? And then I was offered the job as director of the Holocaust Education Center when it was just opening. So from that point on, I stopped any serious involvement except caretaking the work.
And that's 20 years ago or so, 25?
1990.
1990.
30.
So one more question. Oh, Julie asks, looking back, Ronnie, what are your thoughts on rodeo now? And then Sarah, what do you think about rodeo?
Apart with keeping up with a few people, especially Coleman and my friend Deb, I don't follow the sport. It wasn't the sport per se I was interested in. I don't follow hockey either. So I think I just got lost. What was the point?
What are your thoughts on rodeo?
Oh, my thoughts now. So I don't follow it. And many years ago, I noticed that it was getting more kind of slick, like head-on-head competitions and things like that. And it was less the rodeo I knew and the sort of ethos that was around then too. So I don't follow it, so I can't speak to it.
Okay.
And I feel like for me, I feel like I was convinced. I feel like I'm convinced. Like I've never ever thought about rodeos before ever. And it's always interesting to me to, you know, be a viewer, you know, have a little glimpse of something that you have no idea what it means or what it is, because it just makes life that much bigger. So I'm interested, and I am definitely going to a rodeo when the pandemic ends.
A lot of people ask me now, you know, what was it like being a little city Jewish girl photographing this? But it just didn't enter my mind. It wasn't part of why I was doing it.
We have a very sweet note from Celia Haig Brown, who you will recognize as one of the folks interviewed in the film. She writes, I just want to thank Sarah for bringing Ronnie's work back into my life. Of course, seeing Ted and Sophie is such a treat. That photo is in the collection of every family member. Great memories all around.
Well, thanks for being part of the film. That's what I can say too. Thank you.
Yeah. And Ronnie, you mentioned that you made contact with Sophie recently for the first time since.
No. I just saw her screen up there.
Oh.
Before we started, I was scrolling through and I saw her name.
Okay.
On who the guests were.
Great. Are there other questions anyone has? Catherine, I'm so impressed with the juxtaposition of the historical photos with a very contemporary approach to the film work. Well, that's lovely. Thank you, Catherine. So I invite you all to go take some time and look through the exhibit and watch the film and hear those voices. I want to thank Sarah and Ronnie for their hard work in putting this together, and for everyone who supported this work. There are a number of donors who sponsored this work specifically, and we want to thank them, and also acknowledge that this project was made possible through grant funding from the Jewish Community Foundation and Young Canada Works. So we're very grateful for that support. And we have a lot of other exciting 50th anniversary events coming up over the next few months, and we hope that we will see some of you there. Next month, mid-May, we're going to be launching the latest edition of our annual journal, The Scribe, which this year will be focusing on Jewish education in the community, day schools, Sunday schools, and supplemental schools. And we are working on a special 50th anniversary commemorative book that is set to launch in the fall, likely in November. It's really coming together nicely, and we can't wait to share it with everyone. So subscribe to our newsletter, stay in touch with us. We will be continuing to do remote programs and programs online. And as soon as we're able, we'll get back to getting together in real life and celebrating our community's history and historic figures like the great Ronnie Tessler. So thank you all. And we hope you have a lovely evening, and we look forward to seeing you all again real soon. Thanks very much.